because I know a lot of our listeners who are looking at job roles, it would be on the EIA sector, and not really too sure what that kind of means. So could you kind of break that down for our listeners?
Yeah, so environmental impact assessment is effectively a planning tool to enable decision makers to assess the potential effects of a scheme on the environment. That, in a nutshell, that's what it does. In practice, what that means is undertaking a series of surveys and assessments of the site, understanding what we call the baseline situation is, so what's there at the moment, what elements of the design are going to change that baseline, and what it's going to look like in the future. Mm-hmm. And then basically undertaking, there's a certain element of value judgment as to whether those things are positive or negative, and actually how significant, that's the key phrase, significant, how significant they are likely to be, and how much mitigation they require to remove those